Hey guys, it's Tiny Tom Logan back with another video for you. Today we're going to be taking a look at our first of the new AMD graphics cards, and that's going to be the R9 280X. And I did have to look to read it off the box because I've been saying R9 and R7 and 280, 270, 260, and I'll keep getting all the letters and the numbers mixed up. My brain is completely frazzled. Now, right from the beginning, we're not going to do this video with the selection of all the screenshots and kind of comparisons and stuff like that. So right now, if you want to follow me through the video, click to the main review link here where we've got all the graphs, all the comparisons. This is the most important thing. With the graphs, you can obviously see the comparisons rather than just with the 7970 or the 770. From NVIDIA, for example, you can see these cards in the big list of graphs on the Overclock 3D website. And this is kind of going to be like a verbal kind of, really like a giant conclusion, really. Now the prices have come in. The 280X, we're looking at kind of hitting the kind of £275 to £300 mark. Now I've actually got the DCUII top from Asus, which is going to be kind of dropping in, we're hoping, around the 290 mark. Now, I've got it here, but I will give you an up-close look at it quickly now. And then we'll come back and we'll have a good old chit-chat about everything, about all my thoughts and everything, once you've seen the old girl up close. Okie dokie then, peeps. An up-close look at the card, and I'm kind of hugging the tripod. So if you get any of that, that's because I've got my arm through the middle of the tripod. So we're obviously looking at the Asus R9 280X DCUII top, and this one is 1070 megahertz on the GPU core. It's got an overclock on it, 70 meg, and then we've got 1600 megahertz on the memory, which obviously if you quad pump it, which is what you have to do with GPU memory, 2 times 1600 is 3200 times that again, and you get 6400 on the memory, which is what they're stating now. If we have a look, we've got an 8-pin and a 6-pin on this side. There we go, DCUII logo. One thing we can, they've got this dual fan thing, which they say helps focus the air slightly more on this one. And to be fair, the DCUII cooler works really well. As I'll say later on in the review, 70 degrees tops. And it does stay really quiet as well. Something to point out, if we have a look here, this is where the PCI bracket would bolt in, so we can see the PCB is actually a fair bit bigger, so is the cooler. And when we flip it round, we can see a PCI bracket here, so we can see there's a fair extra chunk of PCB. Something we do need to kind of remember is where this is technically like a brand, this could well have just been a 7970 DCUII in the past, so they wouldn't have had to have, you know, really done a lot to this. Got a nice brace on this. When it's in the case, it doesn't sag too much. Obviously with big long coolers, it's just kind of, it's almost part of the norm now with cards having a bit of droop, as long as it's not a ridiculous amount, and it doesn't really matter too much. But you do need a pretty decent brace stroke backplate on them. Something that I will say though is, compared to the GTX 770, it doesn't have a backplate. And I do just happen to have the 770 DCUII there, which obviously does have this lovely backplate, and I do think that it's slightly lacking really. Price wise, $274.99 is what Asus are telling me, but we do know that retailers tend to bump that up a tiny little bit more, so I reckon you're probably going to be looking around the 280, 290 mark for this. And I do think, considering how close these two are on price, that a backplate would have made a nice bit of difference there, just for aesthetic reasons, if nothing else. Because the backplate on the NVIDIA one, it's not really touching anything to keep anything cool. There's no memory or anything there, so it is just there for looks, and I think it would have looked quite nice on this, especially where the PCB is quite big. As you can also see, you haven't really got a lot of places for the air to go out the back, and it is just kind of an internal venting type of thing. And to be fair though, if you've got a decent case, you've not really got to worry about it too much. And with all my test rigs, I always have like the H100i in the roof, but also pulling air from inside the case and exhausting out. And I never really, you know, notice any massive temp differences. But all in all, something I did think was I didn't think there was enough red on it. You've only got those few little bits on there, and although they do look really nice, once they're in your rig, you can't really see a lot of it. So that was the only bit I was slightly disappointed by. And something else, quite differently, if I can get it to focus, you can see that the clips for the power connectors are on the top because of the cooler so close underneath. So compared to normal cards, you have to turn your connectors over. And I did find that once it was in the case that the cables kind of tended to want to go higher because you've twisted them round. If I show you the NVIDIA one, you'll see. Get some light on it. There we go. You can see that the clips are on this side. So this is the opposite way round. And it does, it can make cabling a little bit of a pain in the bum. And there's nowhere really down here for you to be able to clip it or anything. You have got these mounting points here. So you could put like a thin zip tie through this and try and kind of like jack, you know, wrench your cables up close to this, which wouldn't be a bad idea. Hands are shaking because I've just been to the gym and I'm trying to hold this up and it's really not helping. So you could end up trying to jack your cables into this point, but you'd have to use quite a thin one and it'd probably take a couple of attempts. I don't think you'd be able to get another one out of this one, but you could give it a go. That's probably going to be your tidiest way really to do it. Let me put this down because my arms really are shaking now. If I give you a little bit of a closer look in, it does really look, you know, it is a tidy looking card, and like I said, I have been surprised with how quiet this cooler has been as well. 2 DVIs on the back, full size DisplayPort, HDMI, all the kind of normal stuff really. Right, so yeah, I think really it's now time for us to go and have a bit of a chat and everything about the performance, because let's face it, that's the reason why we're here at the end of the day. So I'm gonna shut my mouth and get on with that. Okie chokie. So you've seen the old girl, so I'm gonna put it down. They don't stand up. Normally I'd have it up here, but this one doesn't stand up very well because of the heat pipes and stuff. So you've seen it, we know about the price and everything, so we'll talk about the award. Now we're going to give it the Overclocked 3D Gold Award. Now people might be thinking, oh, it's a rebrand, all this. When you think about it, we gave the 770 the Overclocked 3D Gold Award as well. So we gave that the Overclocked 3D Gold Award because obviously it was, in the grand scheme of things, the 770 was the quickest 680 we'd ever tested. It was marginally just that tiny little bit quicker, whether it was graphics card refinements or whether it was driver changes. Didn't really matter. So if you look at it as being the best of the older generation, or you know, the start of the new generation, that's how that scored. Now the 280X is pretty much being marketed as competition for the 770, because obviously the 280X is, you know, for all intensive purposes, 7970 gigahertz. And obviously the 7970 did kind of, you know, trade blows with the 680, so it does all work out. 7970 turns into 280, 680 turns into 770. You know why they're, you know, their competition. Now the one thing that the AMD lot do have on their side is like the never settle graphics games and all that kind of stuff. It's something that NVIDIA hasn't really capitalized on. They've always worked with partners in the past on specific games, like once upon a time Crysis was always very much an NVIDIA kind of aimed game, and AMD have been clawing this all back. So the fact that you can get games with these cards is something that you should keep in mind when you think about price. But I don't necessarily want to think about it being the be-all and end-all of price for performance, because something a lot of gamers do tend to end up doing is pre-ordering these games before they're even out, or that if they want a game, they'll buy it. They're not going to base a graphics card purchase on the games. I tend to hear more often than not, when people buy their graphics cards, they've either already got the game that comes with the graphics cards, or they're really not that fussed about it, and that you end up them being, you know, traded and swapped and all kinds of stuff all over the forums, and that's rife on Overclock 3D. There's people getting these codes and going, well, I don't bloody know what to do with it. I've already got the games that they fucking want. And I suppose in the long run, in AMD's defence, they have said if you don't want to use your code then, because they're going to have this gold, silver, bronze kind of tiering, that you will get opportunities to wait until another game comes along. But obviously, I mean, we know Battlefield 4 is going to be one of these new games that AMD are going to be marketing pretty heavily. But again, if you're really that fussed about Battlefield 4, you're probably just going to go and buy the bloody thing. And not necessarily buy a graphics card now. Know that you can get Battlefield 4 later, because another thing with these games are, especially the serials, you don't necessarily get them all sorted out for release. So these are all type of things now that are all kind of like sat up and wondering. We don't know what's going to go on. Are they going to have all the codes sent out to people in time? Are people that have bought the graphics card and get these serials going to be able to preload so they can play it, you know, at the official launch time? Or is it going to be all a mad panic rush and people moaning afterwards? We don't know. So these are all type of things that are in my head, and we need to kind of see how they're going to you know, pan out really. But you get the games nonetheless. So price and performance, if it's coming in below the 770, all well and good. But the reason why we kept this as a like a verbal review really was because when the 680 got released, it was, and the only way I can explain it is if you had a 680 in one rig and a 7970 in the other rig, and you didn't know which, you'd have to really know your games to know why one game was a few frames per second quicker than the other one, and you'd know that game favours an Nvidia card and that game favours an AMD card, and unless you knew that, they were so close you wouldn't know. Then the 7971 gigahertz got released, which is just a slightly quicker core clock. That's all they did, and it kind of it pipped the reference 680s. There were some quicker 680s that got released, but then eventually the 770 come out, and it went back to the 770 was just marginally quicker than the 7970 gigahertz again. Well, now we've got the 280X, and we're back to the point where, once again, you really can't tell the difference between the two. If you look at our graphs, it's actually a little bit daft how close these two are. You could get this and the 770 mixed up and not notice. So what I'm saying is it's very much the old kind of 7970 680 debacle again. There's next to nothing between them, apart from depending on the price. And then when you get to the different brands, you're going to get maybe something slightly different in the box. The cooler might be slightly better. The game package that you get with AMD. I mean, with the Asus one that we looked at, the maximum temperature that we got was 70 degrees. But also, this was really, really quiet. And one of the things I'm struggling with here is I'm trying to give you a 280X review, as in like the whole kind of 280s, but still looking at the, you know, like the Asus one specifically, because this is actually the card that AMD sent me and hasn't come from Asus directly. This time around, they've been sending out AIB cards for the bigger ones, and it has been a little bit more confusing. And they're not sending the same AIB cards out to all of the other websites as well. They seem to have got a selection of lots of different brands. But anyway, but for the DCUII, it's ridiculously quiet. One thing I did notice with this brace was it didn't sag too much either. Temperatures were kept nice and low, and it performed really, really well. Overclocking, it's 1070 out of the box on the core. I managed to get that up to 1150 without even any voltage changes. But something I will say is, even if I did start notching that voltage up, I couldn't really get the card any more stable for Vantage. And Vantage is ridiculously strenuous. Vantage will freeze and lock your rig up a lot quicker than a lot of the other systems, the other benchmarks will. So if Vantage is stable, you've got a really, 100% stable, even folding at home stable kind of clock. Above 1150, I couldn't get, any more out of it Vantage stable, no matter whether I put extra volts through it or what I did. So we'll say, but we do need to kind of remember, peeps, it's a 7970. Just because they've changed the name, 1150 is still a healthy, very healthy overclock on a 7970. I've had ones that have performed much worse than this, so it's all done pretty well. And now, one thing I will say is there is obviously the 270s and the 260s been launched, and you may want to be thinking about more of my thoughts around the actual rebranding options, and what do I think about AMD doing it now in almost like in copycat to the way Nvidia have done it, and all those kind of little things that are, you know, maybe ticking around in your head that, you know, I wonder what Tom's got to say about that. Well, I have made a separate video about that exact topic because it's something I did want to cover, and I'm not saying that I've got some, you know, hardcore views on it, but I can certainly understand things that you may not. Or maybe I can think about it a little bit more laterally. And, oh no, rebrand! No, they shouldn't do it. We want brand new cards every time. This isn't good enough, and that's not really the way to look at it. But anyway, I try and explain myself in that. But for this, at the end of the day, yes, it is a 7970 gigahertz under the box. The Asus one that we've got is it's a custom PCB, but that's because it's the DCUII, and we were kind of expecting that anyway. But it's what you'd expect. It's amazing how close this is to the 770. So it's a really good card, really good price. You do need to take those games into account as well. But AMD are just making smart kind of business choices with this. May not please every gamer or every, you know, people that aren't willing to think of, you know, a broader spectrum. But to be fair, there's not really much more I can say about it. You've got all the details. It really is going to come down to your budget and, you know, whether you know, how much you want to spend and which camp that you really want to swing with. So just have a little bit of a think about it. Go and, you know, think about what you want. It's the best thing I can say, really. Anyway, I'm going to love you and leave you because this review or review chit chat, whatever you want to call it, isn't the most difficult, the easiest thing I've ever had to do. But there is a hint of stuff that we may be doing in the not too distant future. But for now, at least, this is Tiny Tom Logan with another video for you. Out.